Yes. Fantastic. So this should be, to a certain extent, food for discussion. Okay, but now it's your turn, ladies and gentlemen. We are really exciting, and we are going to start with this young man in the first row. Please.
Good afternoon. Carlo Polidori from the Italian Association of Road Safety Professionals. Thank you for this interesting event. I have two quick questions for Mr. Ranft and Mr. Vöge. The first question, Mr. Ranft, you mentioned and also appeared in your slide that scale and timetable for autonomous driving is clear. In my opinion, it's not so clear, because there should be a long transition time and so on. So just the question is to clarify your statement. For Mr. Vöge, about the driverless truck, just a question about the issue of the last mile, because in a long transitional time, the last mile cannot be covered by autonomous driving truck. So unless this issue is not solved, how is the real advantage of having a driverless truck? Because we can have an experience or just a driver that are not used to drive after a long travel on the motorway, and then they have to drive in a normal road. Thank you.
When these technologies will be ripe for use and will be available to consumers. But it is clear that we need a sort of good regulatory framework. It is clear that there will be a disruption of sort of traditional manufacturers to some extent or another, which will then, affect some of the consequences on the labour market. So what Tom presented to us, it'll be clear that public transport providers have to rethink their mobility concepts. So there is a clear agenda ahead of us. It's not clear when it exactly will happen, but it is clear that policymakers should get their heads around it. And what we observe at the moment is that a lot of time is sort of spent on talking about security, which is obviously also the #1 concern of consumers. But there's devoted relatively little attention to any of the other kind of like bigger societal changes that lie ahead of us. So there's a clear agenda of what needs to be done. But it's not quite clear when it happens.
Mr. Adler would like to.
Maybe I can add something, because I have been concerned myself a lot with this kind of forecasting on when these benefits will arrive. And of course, Florian is right that it's not exactly clear when they come, but we know that they're going to come relatively quickly. We know that what the replacement rate of vehicles is, how that it takes about 18 to 20 years to replace an entire vehicle fleet. And we know that it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years that practically all of those things are going to be rolling out. So I think that maybe you can push practically the boundaries a little bit backwards, say, let's say 2060, that we will see the full implementation effects. But we know that practically this is going to be very likely the scenario. And so I think when we're talking, especially in the social acceptance debate, then it's not really necessary to say very precisely, but it's very much like helpful to say that, okay, it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think this is what we mean when we say that it's, to us, clear that it's going to occur and that it's going to occur quite quickly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's a very good question. I mean, you can think of the very specific scenario of distribution centers having a dedicated link to a motorway, and then on a theoretical level you can imagine journeys moving freight that never leave a motorway, and then from local distribution centers you will have smaller vehicles which are much more likely to be manual. But this is a highly theoretical one. There are many companies around the world who are trying to get into this market. I mean, in the US you have Otto, Uber, you have Peloton, Tesla showed us a pretty cool truck quite recently. They also have a certain interest in automation. So far, I have not seen a convincing answer to that very important question from them either. So my answer is I don't really know either, and I'm looking forward to seeing that too. I mean, I think it is likely that we see a transition period in which every vehicle will still have a driver in there with just less and less of an active duty for that person, but where we might have more combined trips that go into cities where probably we need a driver anyway, with a little bit, particularly with freight matching platforms coming in, that there will be more of an element of picking something up here, dropping something off there, for which you still need, it wouldn't be a driver anymore, really an operator / service person. So in the short term, if it goes that way, then that problem is solved by that. In the long term, I'm looking forward to industry coming up with a clever idea there.